Hey, I'm not sure how you're placed for time, but I wondered if we could just have a quick talk about coronavirus and
Oh,
just touch on reducing your risk of really bad outcomes from that.
yeah. So coronavirus, I've been on a few months now, kind of 7 days a week. And the reason is that there's no point me talking about my heart disease and other stuff when this is going on because it's so impactful. It's ruining the world and it's undermining everything that we've worked for, I think. Now, of course, there's a lot of tragedy. It's a tough virus. But I've been doing a lot of the data to show, well, look, guys, you have to put it in perspective. So just to give our perspective in Europe, and I have a video out yesterday that explains in 20 minutes a ton of stuff about coronavirus. I must say it's a must watch. But I put together Europe for 360 million people in Europe whose all-cause mortality is tracked over many years in EuroMOMO, which is the Europe Excess Mortality Register. So we've got 360 million people in the register, and now we have the impact of corona. So to give an example, in 2018, there was 140,000 excess deaths during the respiratory season, which is 6 months long. And that's because each year you get excess deaths when a flu comes in. Older people and sicker people, sadly. So 2018 is 140,000. 2020 is around 170,000.
Right.
Okay, so just to put it in perspective, across all of Europe, and year 2000 was higher than 170, a lot higher. It was a bad flu year. So the reality is all across Europe, and I don't want to get into the USA, there's a lot of politics. Or you guys, where Corona came in at the end of a hot summer and coronaviruses never spike in the summer. So you can't even use your data because not that it's untrue, but you can't use data from a southern hemisphere temperate country like New Zealand or Australia at the end of a long hot summer. You just simply can't use data on a coronavirus because they've never spiked with impacts or deaths in the summer. So we'll go back. So 170 versus 140, that's the data. I didn't make it up. And the second big question of coronavirus is, obviously people will say, yes, but we had lockdowns this time. That's why it's lower than it would have been. And all I can say, I go through in the video, all of the scientific evidence and professors around the world and many institutions have done the actual analysis. And sadly, distancing probably helped a bit. Lockdowns did not add anything over distancing mathematically.
Right.
So that's not really the reason. It's a very tough, virus, but we've been here before with other viruses. This year, everything was different for reasons we're trying to work out. I suppose it was panic, bad modeling that said it would be 12 times worse than it was.
Yeah.
And then everyone got caught up in it. So that's just so people relax a little about Corona. It's a tough one, but on what would you do? No brainer, what we were talking about. So it comes from the data now that if you are low in vitamin D, below 20 nanograms versus above 30, there's several studies, but the rough message is you have around 10 times the risk of death or severe outcome. And that's not because you haven't been taking your vitamin D pills. People who are below 20 on vitamin D are a certain type of person. And people above 30 are a different type of person in terms of health. So it's a great marker for health. So the person above 30 will tend to be not insulin resistant. They'll tend to not have inflammation or inflammatory conditions because they drive down your D, remorselessly in the blood test. They will tend to be eating nutrient-dense real food diets. That's how they got to be insulin sensitive and not inflamed. They'll also be getting, in general, more healthy sun exposure with nitric oxide, which is good for your immune system and your arterial health, and it will counteract the effects of the virus. And yeah, maybe they're also taking supplements, which could help. But supplements was only the fifth in the list of 5 I mentioned. So I would say if you, in 4 weeks' time, and I've said this to others and they agree, some of the top experts in the field, I said, hypothetically, you've got Jim and John, they're identical twins and they're the exact same in every way. Same weight, same blood pressure. They live the same life. in 1 month time, we're going to expose Jim and John to this novel coronavirus, right? They're going to get blasted in the face. Okay, I'm going to look at their outcomes. But Jim, for the next month, is going to immediately switch to meat, fish, and eggs only, just for a month. And his insulin and his glucose are going to plummet. His leptin resistance and insulin resistance is going to plummet, right? His vitamin D status, even if he doesn't take vitamin D, is going to go right up, because that's what happens when you fix insulin resistance. Your D in the blood test goes right up. He puts you in the special group. And all those things are going to happen. He's going to lose weight. Hypertension will collapse. You know, all this great stuff will happen. And in 4 weeks, he'll be transformed, right? Because we know this. We've proven it. In 4 weeks, he's going to look completely different and his bloods are going to look fantastic. John, we're just going to let go ahead and eat the processed food. In a month, we expose both of them. There is going to be an enormous difference in the outcome for those two people, right? And that's a month. Dr. Ron Rosedale, I interviewed on this a few months ago, actually, early April. And he was saying, Ivor, it's not months, it's not weeks. Within days, your severity of response is going to be changing quite markedly if you suddenly switched. And if you add in taking magnesium, potassium, you know, and maybe some fish oils and other vitamins and minerals are important, you add that into what we're doing for Jim or John, whichever I said, you know, add that together synergistically. At the end of the month, he's going to be ancestral bulletproof for this thing. His brother might end up in the ICU. Now, that sounds like a strong thing to claim, but all the science supports it. Every single shred of science supports it, but no one's talking about that. You notice they said at the start of Corona very early on, oh, diet has nothing to do with this. Vitamin D has nothing to do with this. There's nothing you can do except hide under your bed. That's a lie. That was a big lie.
Yeah, but diet has to do with everything. They tell us diet hasn't anything to do with cancer or heart disease or diabetes or, you know, so the best thing we can do is get our health back into as premium condition as we possibly can. And that's our best reduction in risk for everything.
For everything. And that's exactly it. In 8 years since I switched, I used to get a couple of flu type things a year and I'd be out of work for a day or two, and I used to work around the clock, and I genuinely have to stay at home. Like, I would be sick. It wouldn't be just I have a bit of a cold, and that would happen to me once or twice a year, rough and tough on average. After a year, when I switched, like I described to you, I noticed after a year, I don't remember in ages, two things: having a cold or a flu, or having a headache. And I often got headaches. And I just noticed after a year, what happened to those? And then I began to keep an eye on it. They almost disappear. The flu type stuff or severity, you can work through them now, even if you get one, because everyone in the house got it and I get it. I work through it. In the old days, you'd be in bed for a day or two, you'd feel like crap. That's gone. And headaches are gone, unless I drink a ton of wine or something. Headaches are gone. Disappeared.
I've had the flu twice in my life, 1980 and 2018, and I was so annoyed I didn't make it to 40 years without having a second dose of the flu. And I put it down to my high cholesterol. I put it down to having a really good immune system.
And probably, as you say, a pretty good diet. And over the years, I'm guessing it makes a big difference. But industry and medicine don't want you to talk about that.
No.
For whatever reason. It's competitive intelligence or something, or it's the influence of pharma and FDA and everything, just to push against it. But I had the swine flu in 2009, actually.
Oh, right.
The big one. And that was a tough one. And I must say, I was 2 days in bed, and I was on my own, my wife and 3 kids, and she was 8 months pregnant. They were living in a different house because I'd moved house to a new house, and I was renovating it completely myself. Yeah. And I basically had to hit the bed for 2 days, and the headache was so bad that if I got out of the bed, I had to crawl downstairs, because if I stood up, the drop in blood pressure, my head would pound for like 60 seconds. And I only realized afterwards that was the swine flu, because the defining characteristic was the headache. But I didn't realize at the time. But I got through it on my own in a house, crawling downstairs to get water every few hours. and sweating profusely. And it was bad. But you know what? And that's when I was unhealthy. That's when I was drinking loads of orange juice. I will tell you, Susan, if I had got that same viral load exposure back in 2009 and I was in the condition I'm in now, I'd say I would have worked through it with a bit of a headache.
Yeah.
People need to realize this. Your immune system depends on what goes in there, mostly.
Yeah.